I'd like to note before this video starts, this video will have spoilers for book 16. A lot of them. Don't say I didn't warn you. Read the book, it's good. So as I did with book 16, I am back with another POV speculation, but this time with statistics! Current information suggests we will find out the POV at this year's Fanwing Fest. Of course, there is none of them in my country, which means the date is fast approaching, and I'm sure everyone has had their own theories. I'd like to apologise that the talk sprites I'm using right now are very oversimplified. I haven't gotten around to drawing new ones yet. Yes, it's been months. Before I share my thoughts, I decided to do some research. I put out a Google form to the YouTube, Tumblr and Wiki community, asking for their opinions on the protagonist. As of the data I am using in this script, I received 46 votes on who they think it'll be, who they want, who they don't want, everything. I'll include the spreadsheet of all the results in the description if you want to see how many people voted your obscure favourite. A small note about the data is I cut all responses that mentioned a general name for a group of characters to save myself the headache. So anyone who mentioned, say, any former POVs or the babies were not counted. The only exception to this was the eggs from the end of book 16, since one of them doesn't even have a name. By a landslide, Mulberry was voted the most likely POV, with 20 votes saying he was the number one most likely, and 9 generally positive votes. In addition, this is likely due to his heavy importance in the hybrid prince and the many unanswered questions about his character, such as his mother's past Queen Scarlet and his strange animal speak. I guess that's the best thing we can call it, ability. I've also noticed a lot of people feel so far that his characterization leaves a lot to be desired, as a lot of purely love interest characters do. Sorry, Riptide. What is your personality? Which could be rectified in the book. Some comments on his possible roles of POV include Mulberry is most possible for proximity and convenience from a writing standpoint, and Roy just seems like he's going to continue to be relevant moving forward. Being one of the dragons to leave the island at the end, it's very clear many agree having him as the next POV would keep it consistent. As I was making this, the Wiki mods decided to make this book 17 cover for April Fools. I feel this is relevant to include. However, Mulberry was also pretty disliked as an option, with 5 people voting they absolutely did not want him. Another character that came up a lot was Platypus, who had 9 votes for most likely, 8 votes for most wanted, tied with Sora for the highest amount in this category, and 13 generally positive votes. I personally agree with this a lot, as Platypus is one of my favourite new characters. Even though she brought the magical death spit joke into Art4, I forgive her. And I really want to get in her head, as no matter how confident she seems, being treated as dead and a ghost for your teenage years probably does something to your psyche. Some comments about her as a POV include, Platypus seems to be the most logical choice. She's still on the island where the egg was stolen. She has the most direct connection with finding them in the first place. And with Platypus staying inside the barrier, she provides one of the more interesting characters to be there. For what happens with its following the second egg being stolen? These make a good point that Platypus has got a similarly important connection to the current plot device eggs. Some other notably popular choices were Quokka, Sora, and Kinkajou, with Quokka, is that how you pronounce it? Receiving 8 likely votes, 6 wanted votes, and 9 positive votes, so receiving 3 likely votes, 8 wanted votes, and 7 positive votes, and Kinkajou receiving 6 likely votes, 6 wanted votes, and 4 positive votes. However, all 3 of these also received higher negative votes, making them more controversial. Comments for each include, Quokka just makes sense in my head. She's following the main action, she's connected to a lot of the characters, but she's not super special like Mulberry or Kinkajou, so it doesn't feel like a turning point for the series to have her. We didn't see enough of Sora. And I believe Kinkajou is most likely to be the next POV, because it's completely random that she disappears alongside the queens. I believe her disappearance in the epilogue of the Hybrid Prince is just leading up to her reappearing again in book 17. There was also a few characters that tended to come off a lot negatively, such as Beryl, Snakeroot, and Dugong, for some reason. Beryl and Snakeroot both had exclusively negative votes, with Beryl receiving 2 votes as the number 1 not wanted, and 1 generally negative vote. It's hard to find characters that got a lot of negative votes. Snakeroot had 1 vote as number 1 not wanted and 2 generally negative votes. They're next to each other in having 3 negative votes. Obviously I understand this, they're literally Book 16's antagonists, why would they be a POV? Dugong was actually a lot more controversial, but I decided to include him due to the sheer amount of negative votes, having 5 votes saying he was their number 1 not wanted POV, which is the highest score in that category of any character mentioned. There are no justifications on why. I'm assuming this is a mix of people who just didn't like the new characters in general, and people who dislike the implied relationship between him and Sora, as people don't like the implication that Sora's straight. Though someone did say that they headcanoned him as closeted trans woman, which is a gorgeous headcanon. Do we make this canon, please? A lot of people also said they didn't want repeat POVs, which obviously makes sense. Monarch, Taipan, and Cliff also received negative votes. There was also a few characters who I noticed received similar amounts of positive and negative votes. Harmony was one of these, with 1 vote as the most likely, 2 votes for wanted, 8 positive votes, but 4 number 1 not wanted votes, and 2 other negative votes. A comment on her as a POV was, also I wouldn't hate a Harmony POV, but she does not need to be Book 17. Book 18 or 19 maybe? While Amy also had equal amounts of negative and positive votes, with 2 positive and 2 negative. The babies were also controversial as a whole, with most of the people voting them not aware that Book 16 is set at the same time as Book 7, up until the last chapter, which is presumably set after Book 15. So the babies are still, babies? Peacemaker was the most popular of them, mainly due to Chewie mentioning him having strange dreams in recent interviews. Now, with that summary of fan and opinion, I bet you're all dying to hear mine. I would say if you put a gun to my head and asked you who I thought was the most likely, I'd say Kinkajou. With the reveal that she went missing with the queens, I think it's possible she'll either be used as a vehicle to reveal what happened to them, or she's with them or went to look for them. Kinkajou has always been a popular choice for future POVs, and a favourite of Tui's. However, I would argue that she could also not be, as Tui's already denied that she would, stating in an interview in 2020. The main reason Kinkajou has not had a book is 1. Tui likes to develop characters over the course of the book, and Tui already likes Kinkajou the way she is. She doesn't need to develop. 2. Kinkajou has already saved the world like 8 million times, so if you ask her, all the books are really about Kinkajou. So Tui would have to come up with something very specific to Kinkajou, and she would have to work through that in the course of the book. And if she is with the other queens, that would likely give away the twist too early, so it could always be set before the epilogue. Despite that I feel she just makes sense, I don't know, so in the background of this video I decided to draw a fake cover featuring her. I'll put this final drawing up on my community tab. Another character that was mentioned during the course of running the call I was convinced of was Platypus. As I mentioned earlier, she's my favourite new character, and her staying behind to keep an eye on the Court of Refuge may mean she's roped into investigating whatever's going on in the tunnels, with the other egg now missing, despite Platypus's disinterest in them. I think she would be a really fun POV due to her having a very specific tone of voice you don't often see with her aggression and energy. I'm just not sure we're going to have 2 Court of Refuge books in a row, but who knows. Now, as my theories are drawing to a close, I would like to quickly pull out this wildcard option I have in the back of my mind, being Icicle. This is based around a general Arc 4 theory I plan to talk more about in full once we know a bit more about Book 17, but the basics of it are that in Snowfall's absence, Icicle has kind of become the Icewind Queen, based partially on her importance as a foil to Sora, and foreshadowing such as the ancient Icewind Queen being called Icicle. Tui's mentioned we will see her trial in either Arc 4 or Winglet, which opens up the possibility for her to rig her own trial in the chaos of Snowfall's disappearance and let herself free. Obviously, this doesn't mean she has to be the POV for this to happen, especially easily happen with someone like Lynx, Hailstorm, or Mink as a POV. But I would be intrigued to hear what her side of the story is, as I'm not fully convinced she's completely evil. As a recent podcast Tui took part in, she implied that after Book 18 the series will either end or there will be a significant time skip to Book 19. This makes me think that if we're going to get, say, a Peacemaker, or Auklet, or Mink, Bumblebee, etc. POV, it'll be in book 19 or 20 rather than 17 or 18. So that's all for now. Thanks to everyone who contributed to the poll, and if you didn't get the chance, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I really stumped for this book, and I want to know what everyone thinks.